Hi, it's Todd from Todd's Workshop and Todd Cutler here, and today I'm back with a making film. Now, very rarely do I do that, but in this one I am going to be showing you how to make this Rondel dagger in absolute detail, every single little bit of it. So it's probably going to be quite a long film, let's face it, but I'm going to show you how to make every piece, how I put it together, how it's constructed, because it's not obvious, this one. And this is the A726 from the Wallace Collection in London. Now, for those of you who don't know the Wallace Collection, it's an absolute gem of an arms and armour collection right in the heart of London. If you're here, go see it. You will not regret it. And of all of the iconic pieces, and there are so many, there is no dagger in there which is more of a business-like piece than this. It is a brute of a Rondel, absolute beast. Rondels have fascinated me for a very long time, because they're the absolute standard sidearm of knights from the 15th century. So knights when they're wearing full-on armour, head to toe. And that makes these intriguing, because they are, of course, designed to defeat their armour. And I want to know, if there's anything you know about me, I like discovering things. I like trying to find out. And so I thought, I'm going to make a Rondel. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to make the dagger and show everybody how to use it, then let's have a look, see how good a job I've done. So, second film, I'm going to take this back into the Wallace Collection, lay it side by side with the original, talk Rondel daggers, talk this dagger with Dr Toby Capwell, Arms and Armour Curator at the Wallace. And then, if I've done that, I now need to know how it's used. So, Matt Easton from Schola Gladiatoria is going to come on by, and we're going to take this knife, and we're going to, well, attack mail, plate, gambeson, flesh, and we're going to see, well, how it survives. How does this do? How does the armour do? How much work? Anyway, you'll get the idea. But that's film 3. And so that's going to give you a really comprehensive look at this Rondel, how it's made, and how it was used. I've loved it. For 20 years, I've loved this knife. So, I'm going to make this for you. And if we're going to make it, and it's a special video for me, I'll make it out of special things. So we have a bloomery steel blade on this, and wrought iron discs, boxwood as per the original, I think, a bit hard to tell, and brass, which is unusual, but as per the original. Some of you can go out and make it. Some of you have the equipment. Some of you have the knowledge. If you haven't, learn, try, because that's how you're going to get there. So just go and make it. I love it. I love it when people make stuff. Try it. But I do know that it's not for everybody. So if it's not, and you really want one, there is a link right at the end to ones which are commercially available. Go check it out. Anyway, roll on the film, starting with the blade. Welcome to a workshop, or at least some of my bench space, anyway. Now, the first thing to remember is I do love my history, I do love my historical objects, but I also am a commercial enterprise. So I mix between historical techniques and modern techniques. I always try and cover my path, so you would never know in my finished items. That's the point, that's what I do. But if I can find a faster way to do something, I do. And that's what you're going to see today. So the blade. It's a monster. It starts at about 14 millimeters thick on the spine. The blade itself is around about 15 inches, 39 centimeters in length. It's big, it really is. It is a chunk of a weapon. And it's made of a shear steel, so basically a homemade steel that's been laminated up and the carbon folded in. And you can see that folding process. So have a look at the spine of that. You can see how thick it is, but you can also see the texture of the folding process. That will largely get cleaned away during the grinding, but there'll always be a bit of witness left at the end. So that's the blade, that's what we're going to start with. And the first thing we are going to make is the blade itself, because then that has to integrate with the hilt, and you can't start the hilt work really until you know what's happening with the blade. The hilt itself is made of these wrought iron discs, and I'm going to dish these, braze these together, so they're going to become hollow. And an awful lot of dagger components are hollow because you don't want excess weight, especially on a big boy like this. And the next thing is the grip. Now, if you look at the pictures, it's really quite a dark wood. It's almost like a walnut colour. I very strongly suspect, I don't know what the wood is, but I very strongly suspect it's not a walnut, it's something harder, probably box. Now, box is a very pale wood, and I think that actually what we're seeing there with that colour change is 600 years of cleaning. Now, box is really tough, really hard, and it's got a very strange little dovetail inset on this for the decoration, and I think that that would be hard to do unless it was in a strong wood, a hard wood like box. So that's why I think it probably is. I don't actually know. I don't know if the museum has examined it. That's my guess. The last element are the 2 brass panels on either side of the grip and the flower washers. Those are going to be done in brass. Now, very often you see in museum catalogues it says copper alloy, and in historical sense there's a big fudge line between brass and bronze and sort of other similar materials. Brass is quite a specific term, and it does look like brass, but it's actually a really early use for brass. It's quite unusual in medieval weapons at that period. But brass it says, so brass we will do. I'm in my grind shop now, and I've got my welding bench here with the drawing on it. Now, interestingly, when you look at the drawing, you'll see it hasn't even got the whole blade form on it. And the reason is that if you're talking about triangular blade, you're just talking about thicknesses, how thick at the spine, how deep it is. That's all you need to know. So I've got my verniers here, calipers, call them what you will, to do my measurement, because it's got to be accurate for this. And then I'm just going to follow the numbers on here. So I'm going to hit my grinder now, and we're going to start taking some of this stock off and turning it into a blade. So I've just hogged off a load of material there to just begin to set the bevels, but it's kind of a little bit of an arbitrary process. I don't want to go too far, so I'm now going to go back onto the flat platen. But on the back here, I've written the thicknesses of the spine, so I'm now going to carefully grind these bevels in until I get those thicknesses on the spine, and then I'm going to concern myself on the section depth much more. But what I would say right from the beginning is there weren't as many sparks there as I would like, so this material is a lower carbon than I would like. It's the material I've got to make the knife with, so that's what we're doing. So let's get on, and I'll start to put the bevels on and then smooth the front and back. So here's the blade with some of the bevels set on it. And you can see I'm now thinning the edge. It's what? 3 mil, 3.5 mil, 1/8 of an inch, something like that on thickness, roughly. Now I'm just going to flip it over, and we've got the numbers that I drew on the spine here. Now as that bevel comes into this edge, obviously I'm now going to start thinning that. So what I need to do is get my verniers out and make sure that I'm getting it down to the right kind of area for these numbers. Just a little bit over really, so we can do a bit of post-heat treat grind on it. This area, I'm not going to grind very much because it's a little bit complicated. It messes with your mind because of that sort of bit that's set down here. So I just need to run it up to about this point, and then I'm just going to blend that in, making sure it doesn't get too thin here. It's a danger area, this, and I'm speaking from experience of doing this knife before. I've carried on laying the bevels onto this knife now, but there is a slight problem with it that I need to address right now. So have a look at that. I don't know if you can spot it. There's actually a curve on this blade here that the tip comes around like that. So what I've got to do is straighten this spine now. So I'm going to lose all these numbers, but I'll just put them back on. But so now I'm going to clean the back of this knife and turn that into a straight line. I've flattened the back of the blade now, so the next thing for me to do, you can see on the original, there is a bevel on the back face. So that is going to be the next step that I do. And then after that, I'm going to finish grinding the face bevels on and blending it all through into this point, making sure I don't go too thin on here. I've finished the bulk of the blade grind now, so the next thing I'm going to do is grind the tang to shape. Now the rondels come down and slide from above, so you need a little step in the tang there to cover that joint and to stop it being ugly really. So what that means is the tang is going to get thinned in that orientation, but also it's going to get turned into a bit of a wedge, much like the blade is as well, and that will help us just place it into the rondels better. So the first rondel obviously is going onto a big triangle, so that's not going to rotate. We then burn the handle on, that won't rotate. Now the top rondel, if I just thin that to be a nice 6mm round shaft, you could rotate that whole rondel. So actually, the bottom of this tang goes through the half of the rondel, and the top half is shouldered down and goes through the top of the rondel. Stops everything rotating, keeps everything lovely. So back to the grinder. So what I've done here is finish the tang off with, you know, a reasonable bit of radius, but I've got a lot of body in there, which is important. And then I measured the thicknesses of the bottom rondel, the grip, the top rondel, and that, of course, then gives you the overall length. And I've just cut the tang rod effectively in the end there, nice and neatly. So that'll go through the top rondel. Everything will be locked, absolutely solid, no rotation, no horribleness. So now that we have all of this set out, I'm just going to taper that down here because you don't need it that thick. It's excess weight. It doesn't add to the strength of the knife. So I'm going to remove that and sort of basically taper it down a little bit all the way to here. I've I've finished the first part of the blade grind now, so I've got the tang set up, I've got the whole bevels and everything. So we've now basically got a blade. And the next step is going to be to do the rondels. So the first thing I'm going to do is just dome them slightly. And then, when they're domed, I will cut in the shape of this tang here so that they all slide on, and then I'll braze them. We're going to start forming the rondels now, and they're made from 2 sheets of wrought iron. So basically they're just dished a little bit, so when you stick them together, you end up with something that looks like a lens in its profile, but not very deep. It's only about 8 or 9 millimeters thick. I have a hollow in the log here, and I just beat into that hollow, but not very much, because each half only wants to be about 4.5 millimeters deep. It's a lot less than you would think it is, and it's easy to overdo it. So I'm just going to start now paying particular attention to get it into the edges, because otherwise it goes and flat. A bit weird and horrible. So, going to start in the middle and then work our way to the edges, make sure it's all lovely and domed. So we've got a bit of doming on it now, but the actual profile is that. So I'm going to work that central dome out to the edges. And it should all come good. So if you look at that, it's just slightly domed. And the fact that it's not a completely clean and beautiful part of the hemisphere, don't worry about it, because this material, there's enough thickness that when we're grinding it down after the job, we can smooth it all down and it'll be lovely and fluid. But I'll just check it over, make sure the edges are not too wavy, and then we'll go. And then just a little bit more in the middle. Okay, so there we are. 3 more of them. We have our 4 discs now, and the front pair of discs are actually slightly fatter than the back pair of discs. So choose the 2 deepest ones you've done, and they become the front, 2 shallowest become the back. Front, back. So the next step is to braze them. Now it's going to be very difficult for me to braze onto a hard edge like that, it'll just be messy. So what I'm going to do is flat the whole disc off on the grinder, and then it's going to be flat on flat, and it'll be a beautiful edge for brazing. So back to the grinder. Because we've flatted them off now, when we braze it together, glue it effectively with liquid metal, you'll get yourself a nice neat joint that you can clean up after. But actually, we've got to cut triangular holes through this, or trapezoidal holes, of different sizes because of the way the tang is. I'm not going to be able to do that if these are joined together. So the next thing for me to do is to cut the holes in this that match the tang of the blade, and then when they're done, then I braze it together. What I have to do now is cut these discs in one by one. So obviously the tang, the width of the tang here on the back of the blade, is wider than the front. So really, I measure in that orientation, I measure here, and I measure at the blade side, and it will give me a trapezoidal form, 4-sided form, and I just mark that onto my disc here. And I did say that I don't always work in a historical way, so I have my pendant drill here, and I'll cut that slot out and make it fit onto here beautifully, I hope. So here we go, I'll measure up, and off we go. So I'm just going to connect these lines up now, and I'll cut them out with my little tiny grinder. This top part here will fall away fairly easily, I think. And in fact, there we go. So I removed this first part here. It was easy enough to get off. And this last bit, I can't get the cutters in without marking the steel. So, wiggle off. Looks a little bit rough, but I'm all going to file it up anyway. So it really doesn't matter. A little bit of a test fit. And actually, God, goodness, that is remarkably good for a first off. So I'm going to file that up and we'll get that fitting beautifully in there. Looking at this closer, I think what I need to do now at this joint here along the edges of the blade is get a better radius on it. So while this steel is still soft, I'm just going to put a file in there, get a nice radius on it, and that should bring everything up tighter and neater, really. The first rondel is fitted up now, so it fits pretty well. And that's actually the hardest one to do because of the interaction with the blade edge. Second rondel now. Same thing, I'm just going to transfer that tang profile onto here, cut it out, drop it on, and once they match, and you want it reasonably good, but once they match, then we can go and braze them. I'll obviously do the second set before we get to the brazing. Of course, I'm using that little disc cutter on the pendant drill, but you can do this with a file. Just drill out and then just file it square. It's just faster this way. Not quite there yet, but the last bit I will file. We have all 4 of our rondel discs now, which are attached, but as you can see, it's not square and it moves. So it could be exaggerated, but literally in that position and still fit. So I'm going to cheat again. So I'm going to set it nice and square. So visually it's square. I'm just going to take a little weld, obviously closing my eyes, and do the tiniest little spot weld just on the edge here. So now, that's square. So I'm going to spot again in 2 more places, and that helps me when I'm brazing as well. So then, we do the same for the top. So the bottom one now is square, it's not going to move, it's not going to go anywhere. So the top one, the same is exactly true. It could be all over the place. I don't want it all over the place, I want it neat. Going to check because it moved a bit. Oh yeah, not quite straight. It's a tiny spot weld, so I can move it a bit. Good. So I'm just going to spot again. This one, just going to close it up a bit. That should be fine now, but I'm just going to visually check it to make sure it's square. Square enough by eye, that's all they ever did, and it looks fine. So the next thing is to braze them. So I can take them off, and what we're going to do is literally melt some brass and flux. Flux is just a cleaning agent. Melt some brass and it acts just like a glue running into this joint here. We'll get that done and then we'll clean them all up and they'll be finished and lovely. So a bit of brass rod and the powder is a flux. Cleans it as we go. So that's the first one done. Now I guess a lot of you out there don't have oxyacetylene, or oxypropane in this case, but if you do want to make these things, just have a go, and you will always be able to go and find the local engineering shop or a fabricator or something who can do the little bits that you can't. Because the thing is, the only way you're going to learn is by trying. And don't get put off because, you know, you haven't got this or you haven't got that tool. Find somebody who has, because people are interested in this, and you will find people will really, really be helpful. If you're chatty to them and you offer them £10, £10, whatever, people will help. So these two rondels are brazed up now. Just going to leave them to cool, give them a clean up, see what we got. I've just come off the belt sander now and I'm on 150 grit, so I'm going to go on to my polisher now with a finer wheel. All of this could be done with files and sandpaper. You don't need this stuff, it just takes a lot longer, that's all. Anyway, so here we go. Get them up into a nice clean state. I've finished the cleanup, finished the polishing on these, and as you may notice, there's quite a lot of pitting on it. Well, the thing is, it's wrought iron which has been beaten into a sheet, and I could keep on getting deeper and deeper, but I don't know, I might end up breaking through. So I've just decided a little bit of a historical texture, perfect. I'm going to cut the billet timber now for making the handle out of. I'm using a really big bit of boxwood, and this is very wasteful. But, you know, I care about you lot, I want it to be special. So I've marked out where I think the cleanest bit of wood in this is going to be. And I'm just going to cut down, first of all, while it's in a big round, it saves jumping out my hand, and then I'm going to go across the grain to split out that billet. So here we go. So I very carefully selected my timber for the first attempt, cut into the middle, and found that. So I had another go. So we now have a lovely, clean, solid piece of boxwood. Tiny little mark here, but it's not deep. So I'm going to pilot a hole through it now, and then we're going to burn the tang on. And here we are. I'm going to burn the grip onto the tang now. I don't want to heat these up again because this is all getting red hot. Don't want to stain them, so they're going to come off. This is going in some aluminium jaws in the vise so it doesn't mark the blade. Nice and tight, because you do not want it slipping while you're doing this. And then that is going to go on there. But of course it doesn't fit yet, so we've got to make that red hot. So, great. So that's going to fit on now. You don't want to leave it on too long to burn any bigger than it needs to be. I'm not even going to try it on a test fit. I know it fits, right? I'm going to leave that to cool, and then we're going to start shaping this down. I've burnt the grip on now, and I want to start shaping it down. Now, if you look at this piece here, you've got a brass panel inset here and here. And those are actually, these brass inset panels, are in line with the edge and the back of the blade. So what that actually means is that the grip is wider that way than it is that way. It's completely wrong for your hand. Totally, it's like 90 degrees out. However, that's how the original was, so that's the way I'm going to do it too. If I had a choice, I'd actually make this grip 90 degrees different to the original, but I'm not. I'm copying the original. So I now have a rectangular block of wood. I'm just going to freehand it on the sander here, take the corners off and turn it into an oval, the shape of the grip. So we have a nice oval grip now, and I'm just going to put it on the belt sander there, just take all the deep gouges out, smooth it off, sand it off, and then we're going to put it to the side for one moment. I have my boxwood grip, nice and smooth, right dimensions, fitted to the handle. But there's a bit of gap here I don't like, and that's because this is slightly domed and that's completely flat. So I'm just going to hollow out the inside under there just a little bit, 0.5 millimetre, 1 millimetre. I'll get that on, that'll fit perfectly. And then we can reduce the height of this until the top rondel fits correctly as well. So I have a tiny little multi-blade cutter here. Just going to recess the bottom of this grip. Very, very little needed. And there we are. Perfect. So we can now shorten the top one, do the same process on the top rondel. So exactly the same process as before. I'm just going to hollow out a tiny little bit underneath so it sits onto this curved rondel, and then we should be done. So that goes back on, top rondel goes on, and it is a perfect fit. So that's exactly what I was after. And as I said before, the handle completely at 90 degrees to what you would expect. So I'm just going to drill a hole for the decorative rivet here. There's only one hole through this blade, but of course it's important to do it before hardening. So I'm just going to pop it on, and I'm not going to go all the way through the tang because the tang is angled. I'm just going to touch the tang because if I try and go through it, the drill will drift off and it will not be central on the other side. So now I'm able to cheat it a little bit and just help it not drift offline. It's a difficult thing to explain, but it's just, this will either be obvious to you or not, but experience helps to know it's going to happen. Going to put it back together, and I'm going to carry that hole all the way through to the other side of the grip. So we're done with the blade now because everything's fitted up to it. So it's time to heat treat it. So we have our blade now, and we're going to pop it into the oven for the heat treat. So we're going to get it up to temperature, we'll quench in oil, and then we'll temper back and do the hollow grinding afterwards. So we'll do the finish after the heat treatment, after it's fully done. So here we go. I have our grip in the vise here. On each side of it, so on the spine and the cutting edge of the dagger, there is a little brass panel that's inlaid. So I need to sink 2 cuts in, chisel that out, and then create a dovetail underneath so I can slide the panel into the dovetail and it won't come out. So we'll start by very carefully cutting our 2 grooves. So I've cut the 2 grooves now into each side of the handle, but actually the dovetail underneath, I've just realised I haven't got a tool that's going to be able to cut that dovetail. So I'm going to make a little scraper that's going to go up and down inside that groove, just scraping, well, the undercut for the dovetail. So I'm just going to do that now. So I have a tiny little scraping tooth here, and I'm going to dress a real proper edge on it with my mini grinder in the other room. Let's go test it out. Got a nice sharp edge on it. It's slow, but it works. So I get it into the groove that I've sawn and chiselled, and I just pull it back and forth. Just finishing off now with a file to remove any lumps and bumps from the scraper. And now I've got to cut some little brass panels, really quite accurately sized to fit into that dovetail and just slip in there. I've got some brass sheet here and I've got my handle. I want to accurately cut the width of this brass sheet to suit these grooves in here. I'm going to use a guillotine. I do a lot of this stuff, so I've got one. But you could do this just as well with a hacksaw or even tin snips. Either way, it's going to work. So what I need to do now is measure the distance. I'm going to add a tiny bit on because of the undercut. So 10.22, so I'm going to make it, let's say 11.5. That could be plenty. Just marking it on. And again. Right. So we'll lose the guillotine. The natural form of this groove, once I've scraped it and then filed it, is just slightly curved like that. It's also going to make the panel a little bit stronger. So I'm just going to dome these now, just sort of dish them a little bit along their length, just a tiny little bit. And I'm going to do that in the jaws of the vise here. So not hitting very hard. But by the time that goes in, it'll be nice and stiff and won't move. I'm not expecting these to go in, and indeed they don't. So what I'm going to do now is just flat the edges off and then just bevel those slightly, and we should get them to basically just slide in there nice and easy. It's really difficult to know where it's stuck, so I'm actually going to use itself like a file. So I'm going to put that end in the vise and just run it backwards and forwards until I manage to free it. We're in. So I'm going to cut it to length, I'm going to clean it up, and then we put our groove marks in it. We have our brass panels set in, and they fit really well actually, but they've just now got 3 grooves, and they're very simple things. It's almost like just a saw cut and then cleaned up with a file. I never worry about matching reproductions exactly when I'm doing this, because the thing is, I think you get the spirit of the piece by working in the same way that the original guy did, which is he was just making a dagger. And if you just make a dagger, it might be a little bit different, but the spirit will be the same. That'll do. So we'll cut those in. And ready for the polish. And there we are. Our handle is nearly finished here, but on the original it has a 5-pointed star floret decorative washer that sits on both sides here. So we're going to start making those. So I've got 1.5mm brass sheet, just going to punch a hole in the middle, punch a mark, and I'm now going to scratch the 5 points for the star. I've marked out the 5 divisions, and I'm just going to mark out where the holes are going to go in the outside perimeter of the piece. Just going to crop off all the material I don't want. So I have my 5 divisions here, and just either side of the division is a little file line. So I'm just going to saw those in now and then widen them with the file. I'll do that on all the sets. It's all filed out. It's a little bit rough, but actually when you smooth it down and then polish it, a lot of this will go. But I'm just going to tickle it back in with a file a little bit, and then I'm going to punch my holes. Now I've got to drill them through. I satinised it, I polished it, it gets rid of all the lumps and bumps, bent it round a bit of bar stock, and there we are. First one, all done. So I've got to do another one now, and then we'll be done with the florets. Going to open the oven up and go for the quench now. It's all got to be a little bit fast, so see you in a minute. You saw the blade go into the quench, and then after that you take it out and you put it back in the oven again at a lower temperature, 240 centigrade in this case, and that tempers it, takes some of the hardness and some of the brittleness out, but leaves the toughness, so it leaves it strong. But that whole process actually removes carbon from the surface, so the outer skin of this is really quite low carbon, which is not what you want in a knife. It's quite soft. The carbon's there to keep it harder. So I have a thickish edge here of maybe about 2 millimeters now, 1.5 millimeters, and I'm going to take all that down, clean this up and turn it into what looks like a nice knife blade, but then we're going to hollow grind it. Next step of the grinding is done, and as you can see, that's a pretty nice looking blade. You could use it just as it is now, but the original hollow ground the whole length, so we'll obviously do that. And again, just like the original, this funny little section here, for whatever reason, is actually hollow ground. I don't know, you tell me, because it doesn't have any function as far as I can tell. I'll do this section first, and then we'll go on to the main blade. When I hollow grind, I start with a small wheel to create a position and a guide really, and then you can feel where you're going because the next wheel drops into that one. And then you use subsequent wheels to sort of clean it up. You'll see that a lot better on the long one here. But I did the same process here, starting with a small wheel, going up, and I'm now on my final big wheel. I'll get it all into position, then put a nice fine belt on and clean it up. Our little notch here is hollow ground, and now we have to do the main blade. So the hollow grinding itself goes to about 30 millimeters, inch and a quarter or so from the end. So I've just marked that on there. And then I'm going to mark a center line down the blade. And that is going to be what I try and hit with my hollow grinding. And then at the end here, the hollow ground also sweeps up, because otherwise it would interfere with the intersection on the rondel. After you've done the hollow grinding, you can hit it with a satinising mop, and that blends it all in. And any sort of slight imperfections, you won't notice anymore. The hollows are in on both sides of the blade, all the way to here, nice and straight, nice and even. Now they've been done with a smaller wheel, 100mm, a 4-inch, but I want to go much bigger than that, so I've moved on to a different grinder now to just finish off the hollow grinding. So here we go. All the hollow grinding on our blade has all been blended in with satinising mops, smoothed off, no scratches. Time to polish. And the blade is finished, so we'll put it together for a trial fit, make sure everything fits before finally actually peening it all together and connecting it, because there's no going back after that. Then we take the blade and the rondel, put that together, slip the grip into position. Now usually with the rondel, you just put the top disc on, just peen it, knife is finished. This one has this decorative element going through the tang. That's really quite unusual. But nonetheless, it's here, so here we go. So we have a rivet pin that goes through. It's in brass, this. I think if I was designing it, I would have done a contrasting metal, like steel or copper. And then we have a little floret washer, decorative floret, on each face. And there we are. So now you can see that those go into position. And then I'm going to take these off now because they fall off otherwise. And then the top rondel goes on. I'm happy with the fit of this knife now and the look of it. You know, it's a nice weapon. It's a good looking piece. One thing I haven't done is put the mark on. Now, historically, they would have hot stamped it. And in fact, all knives at this period had to be marked by the maker. This one's not yet done. And I can't heat the blade up to hot stamp it because that will mess the temper up. And the hollow grind means I didn't want to do it earlier on. They can be a bit tricky. So usually I electro etch the hollow grind ones, hot stamp the flat ones. So we're off to etch this one. Everything fits, everything looks good, and it's time to put our dagger together. Historically, they would sometimes glue them as well as peening them. I like to glue them. It keeps all the rattles and the squeaks away. So I'll glue it together and peen it. Super secure. So the first thing is a little bit of epoxy down these channels. Doesn't need loads. It's just to try and keep the squeaks away a bit. The dovetails will actually hold it in. Lovely. Little bit of epoxy on this top junction here, and that will just form a gap filler between the bottom of our grip and that rondel. Keep everything secure. In fact, on this one there's almost no rattle at all, so it's just going to need the tiniest amount to get that in. And then a little bit of epoxy on the tang. Again, it's burnt on, so it's a very good fit already. So actually you only need a tiny bit of glue, and it just helps everything be super secure. So just got a little bit of epoxy on the top here. Again, just to act as a gap filler. I don't think historically they probably glued this knife. It doesn't need it. Just helps to keep all the rattles and squeaks at bay. So, last final check, make sure everything looks square. Aluminium jaws in the vise, and then clamp it up. Very tight indeed. You don't want it moving if you can help it. And then, with a peening hammer, round end, we just go around the top tang, folding it over and riveting it. And all that's left is to fit the rosettes. And that's it. It's finally finished. The Wallace Collection Rondel Dagger. One of my favourite pieces. And to be honest, it's a really iconic piece. You know, everybody who's interested in these kind of daggers knows it. I've loved making it. I've enjoyed showing you how I made it, and I hope you've enjoyed it too. So I'll see you again another time. So that's me making a Rondel dagger. But don't forget, there are two more films. One where I take it into the Wallace Collection and compare it side by side with the original. Second one where we get to use it and find out what it does against different kinds of armour, because I want to know. But I said right at the beginning that there were commercially available ones, and there are. So these are available from toggcutler.com, and you can see here, still got the florets, the Rondelles, nice shape on the end, leather scabbard, and of course, the monstrous blade. The materials are modern materials. They're not the old authentic ones that I used in the other, but it's a really great knife and available from toggcutler.com. Check out the daggers page for this and all kinds of other medieval daggers. You won't be disappointed. Thank you.